Welcome to my learning module, assignment 2, SPAD 5023, students with Down syndrome, individuals with 47 chromosomes instead of 46. Strategies to Aid Learning by Julie Scott. The human brain is an interesting computer. The frontal lobe is located in the front of the brain, and the reasoning, motor skills, higher level cognition, and expressive language occurs here. The partial lobe is located in the middle section of the brain where processing tactile sensory information such as pressure, touch, and pain occur here, and is essential for processing body senses. The temporal lobe is located on the bottom section of the brain where interpreting sounds and language occur. This also retains our memories. The occipital lobe is located at the back portion of the brain where we interpret visual stimuli and information. Individuals with Down syndrome have been around for centuries. In 1866, Dr. John Langdon Down, an English physician, identified the characteristics of individuals with Down syndrome. An individual with Down syndrome has a full or partial extra copy of a chromosome 21. This leads to 3 types of Down syndrome: trisomy 21, mosaic Down syndrome, or translocation Down syndrome, of which trisomy 21 is the most common form. There are approximately 1 in every 700 babies in the United States born with Down syndrome. 6,000 babies with Down syndrome are born in the United States each year. There are a couple of myths that I want to state here at the beginning of my presentation. One is that the myth is women 35 and older tend to have more chances of having a child with Down syndrome, but 80% of individuals that are born with Down syndrome occur with women that are under 35. Yes, you have more of an increase of a chance of having Down syndrome when you're older, but most of the individuals that are born occur before 35. The next misconception that is out there is that individuals with Down syndrome are always happy, loving individuals. They are individuals just like everyone else. And so these individuals will be happy, sad, mad, not want to work, just like any of our other students in our classroom. These students have a genetic chromosome 21 disorder that causes developmental and intellectual delays, which means that they can have mild to moderate learning disabilities. They can be in the inclusion classroom or they can be in the resource classroom. The reason I picked Down syndrome is I do have an individual in my classroom in the self-contained room who has Down syndrome, and I wanted to be able to assist in having her learn more life skills. To see the differences between the brain with the individual with Down syndrome and an individual that does not have Down syndrome is to look at the brain and how much gray matter we have. Our gray matter is the home where our nuclear cell bodies, axon, terminals, dendrites, as well as all nerve synapses is our home. This brain tissue is abundant in our cerebellum, and brainstem. Students with Down syndrome, though, show a significant increase in gray matter in the superior column portion of the brainstem and left parahippocampal gyrus in the bilateral parahippocampal gyra. We also have white matter in our brain. This is the tissue in the brain that composes of our nerve fibers. The fibers called axons connect our nerve cells and cover by myelin, which is a type of fat. And the white appearance of the melanin is what gives the white matter its name. Students with Down syndrome, however, have a significant decrease of white matter and throughout their inferior brainstem, and significant decreases in their cerebellum, cingulate gyrus, the left medial frontal lobe, the right middle superior temporal gyrus, and the left hippocampus. What that means for students that have Down syndrome is we need to, as teachers, know their weaknesses and strengths. In their motor skills weaknesses, they have hearing and vision loss. They can have difficulty in speech and language, and their information processing. Their verbal short-term memory is weak. They also have learning from listening difficulties, and they have weaknesses in their numbers because that's more abstract to them. In their strengths category for motor skills, they have a social understanding, empathy, and social skills. They're able to do self-help and daily living skills. Information processing, visual short-term memory is really strong, and the visual learning is a strength, and they can read once they get their phonics and phonics done. So in recap, they have a broad impairment of their memory domain, particularly the verbal short-term memory, which is documented for students with DS or Down syndrome compared to their peers. And they have deficits in their verbal and visual, perceptual, long-term memory, and relative spared visual, spatial, long-term memory abilities. So their areas of strengths are strong visual awareness and visual skills, ability to learn and use sign, gesture, and visual supports, ability to learn and use of written word, ability to learn from pictorial and concrete practical materials. They can communicate and socialize with others, and they have a tendency to model behaviors and attitudes from their peers and adults, and they do really well in structured environments that have routines. Factors that inhibit their learning, we recap the auditory and visual impairment. They have delayed motor skills in their fine and gross areas. Speech and language impairments, which means they're going to have that speech therapist. Short-term and working memory weaknesses, shorter concentration spans, difficulty with consolidation and retention, difficulties with generalization, thinking, and reasoning, sequencing difficulties, and avoidance strategies. Remember that students with Down syndrome are individuals. They all have personality. Their intelligence varies per individual from mild to moderate learning disabled, or not learning disabled, learning disabilities. Their parents are going to match their parents, except they're going to have the same characteristics, but they're not going to look the same as each other. They all have humor, just like everybody else. Learning styles, on their learning, they have the ability to really learn well with visuals. They have compassion and compliance and attitude. Implications for teachers, we need to consider that students with Down syndrome have medical issues. A lot of the students that have Down syndrome have heart defects. They also can develop seizures as they get older. Teachers need to decide, or the special ed teacher needs to determine if an inclusion setting or a resource room is better for the student. Sensory processing is important in designing lessons, and we need to modify the curriculum for the students in the appropriate manner in math, reading, and social skills because of their deficits in being able to retain the information. When I talk about classroom strategies, it's always important to utilize the RTI strategies and the PBS strategies that teachers use for individual students, because what works for one student is going to work for the others. And I don't mean that in that I'm going to use the same strategy for every student, but that as we develop our strategies for our classroom, if this strategy doesn't work, then I'm going to try another strategy. And so each child that has Down syndrome, one of the strategies is going to help them. Extracurricular activities is very important for students with Down syndrome, and a recommendation is Special Olympics. They shouldn't be left in isolation and not be able to do stuff. And family support is important. Get the parents involved. I also included on this website for teachers or parents, there is grants out there for individuals, and the Global Down Syndrome Foundation Educational Grant is a great resource. And if you click on the picture, it will take you to that where you can find information on how to apply for money. A lot of students that have Down syndrome also have muscle hypotonia. If they do have this, teachers need to allow them extra time to complete their tasks, increase opportunities to practice. Their muscle development will require repetitive training. They will need to work with physical therapists to identify and improve or OTs to improve their muscle development. They're going to need to have support for fine motor development on using their wrists and fingers. Multisensory activities need to be encouraged, and materials work well for this. And give them those opportunities to practice self-help skills such as tying your shoes, buttons, and zippers. I also included in the PowerPoint here, I'm not going to read it for word, but I gave some strategies for classrooms to aid us as working with our students that have Down syndrome, because their weakness in abstract thinking is great. So, in their concrete learning is really strong. So, avoid just doing imitation and copying, and have them learn what those numbers represent in math. Distinguish differences between size, shape, and quantity. Have them perform the mathematical procedure, sketch them out first, and then write the solution out after they sketch it, and let them know what those numbers represent. I did a whole bunch of strategies for the ability to recall vocabulary, to speak clearly, to do sentences, because the student in my classroom this is one of her weaknesses. So some of the techniques that we can use to aid her in being able to recall and to speak well is use prompts, give some visual clues, use word association, have them speak slow, ask them to repeat themselves, model, use pacing methods, use cues, practice and repeat, model the behavior. And I know I said model quite a bit, but have play modeling on how I'm acting at the store. Filling words, she needs those too. Reading strategies that need to be done. Provide opportunities for daily practice. Use those visual clues, alphabet line, finger cueing. Encourage practicing in the mirror on the shape and the ah. Again, I'm not going to read word for word, but use those strategies that increase the ability to impact the language development and improve word retrieval and memory. Weaknesses in memory, I did include some strategies here because they do have difficulty in their short-term memory span and in organization as well as the long-term, because they have that more gray matter and less white matter. So we need to review often, solicit answers from them, give them corrective feedback, assign fewer items and allow additional time so they can process that information, repeat the group instruction, give those visual aids, and practice, practice, practice. One, I also included in the PowerPoint a resource guide for teachers to access. And in this guide from West Michigan Down Syndrome Association, they talk about, if you click on the manual, it will take you to it, and it defines Down syndrome, inclusion for success, and in an inclusion for success, they talk about math, social skills, how to do reading and writing. They got some really wonderful techniques in this book. I think it also has it in number 4 in the sensory processing. They facilitating friendships and social interaction, extracurricular activities. It names quite a few that the student can be involved in, and the PBS support systems that will help the student do well. Great resource. So in summary, for the strategies, we need to work on their motor skills and do practice, practice, practice for that. They will need help in their speech. They may need a speech therapist working on phonics. Memory is the short-term and long-term memory will need aid because they have more gray matter than the white matter. I didn't say that right. They have more gray matter than their average brain, and their white matter has been decreased. So they will need the techniques to increase their memory, and they will have difficulty in reading and math because of the memory. Future practices in my classroom, I need to make sure I have direct instruction, give some tactile demonstration and activities to aid in learning and support, create lessons on independence, create timetables and routines and school rules reinforce PBIS, and I need to have those high expectations and predictability characterized for all students. I didn't limit that to just students with Down syndrome because I believe as a teacher, they will do what we tell them. So if we don't have these high expectations, they're not going to do it. Family roles. The family is very important in working with their children. They need to maintain the same expectations of behavior as they would for any other child. They need to teach them how to behave and interact with each other, and in the outside in the environments, in the restaurants, school, saying hi, asking for help. They need to be able to foster independence and cooperation, develop effective home communication, be involved in the school activities, and do additional activities at home to reinforce what the student is learning. And then I included my references where I got all the information for the students. Thank you for listening. It was really informative. There was so much more out there, but maybe another presentation would work on getting all the information out. It was really interesting finding this. Thank you, Dr. Booth, for listening to my PowerPoint on how individuals with Down syndrome can learn.